1942 was less than a year after Pearl Harbor. While the Nazi war machine was rolling through Europe, American boys were either getting drafted or enlisting. So anyway, Coach Lou Andreas drew it up. He was fighting a war of attrition. So in order to fill the void, freshmen from the junior varsity were called up for action.
With yearlings eligible for varsity competition for the first time in almost 30 years, several Cubs are pressing for berths on the Syracuse 42-43 quintet.
One of those Cubs was Binghamton's Billy Gabor, who could have easily been a Niagara Purple Eagle, but they unwisely bailed on his recruitment.
He plays Niagara twice a year for 4 years and beat them all 4 years, twice, 8 wins, including this finale. And he was still talking about that when he was 90 years old.
Gabor didn't start SU's first 7 games, and the team was floundering with a 1-6 record.
And finally, Andreas said, "We're not doing that well, let's try putting the freshmen in." And by the time that season was over, he had scored the most points that any SU player had ever scored in a single game.
Lou Andreas was one of the great innovators of the game, preferring a wide-open style of play instead of a regimented set offense. It was a style that Billy flourished in.
He was fast as lightning, and he was competitive. One of his nicknames was the Bullet. But the favorite line I've ever read by a sports writer about my dad was the introduction to an article about him, and the line was, there was a fierceness about him that was almost scary. And I really think that defines him. He was really competitive.
After his freshman year, Billy served his country as a bombardier and lieutenant in the Army Air Corps.
This is a 1-point win. Syracuse 66, Colgate 65 on February 15th, 1947.
After returning to school in 1945, there'd be many more big nights and big numbers for the 2-time All-American.
He primarily scored in 2 different ways. One, because of his speed, he got a lot of fast breaks, a lot of fast break layups. He had another nickname called the Blonde Bomber, a lot of long 3-point set shots.
In January 1947, a fire destroyed most of Archbold Gymnasium. For the next several years, the team played their home games at the War Memorial, the Jefferson Street Armory, and the State Fair Coliseum. They put out the fire, but Billy was still smoking.
He was the first one to score 400 points in a season, and the first one to leave Syracuse with 1,000 points for his career.
Billy Gabor was the all-time Syracuse scoring leader until Dave Bing broke his record 20 years later. The Bullet was the first Syracuse basketball player to play in the NBA, spending 6 years with the Syracuse Nationals and becoming an All-Star in 1953.
Do you remember Dotty Grover?
And who doesn't remember Dorothy, Dotty Grover? In the early 50s, the beautiful Baton twirling majorette was the halftime highlight at Archbold Stadium.
Dotty Grover, I thought, was absolutely the most beautiful thing I ever saw. And she was blonde and vivacious, and she twirled lighted baton.
She was the leader of the 100 Men and a Girl band. She was a baton twirler, leader of the band. Sometimes I've seen pictures of her on a white horse twirling a baton in Archbold. She was national sweetheart of Sigma Chi. You know, all eyes on her. You know, I have a feeling a lot of guys were fantasizing about, you know, going on a date with her.
When Dotty's marching down the field days were over, she was marching down the aisle with Billy Gabor.
So they met while they were both celebrities. one a Syracuse grad, an NBA player, and my mom, talk of the town at SU. And they married right after Mom graduated in 1953. Dad made Syracuse's all-century team.
These days, Bill Gabor preserves the memory of his parents with objects, scrapbooks, and above all, his heart.
I might be prejudiced, but she was just a sweet woman, a lovable person, and I think she was really friendly and didn't have an ego at all.